Alright guys, welcome back to Alaska Cabin Adventures. Today we're helping my buddy Steve and his girlfriend Tess to build their new cabin in the wilds of Alaska. Steve was the one who helped me build my cabin originally back in 2015, and I figured it was the right thing to do to return the favor and help them get started on their new life and new homestead. Now this is a remote cabin, completely off the road system, and we have to take snow machines in to get there, so it makes everything a little bit more complicated. Hope you guys enjoy. First order of business was getting some tools packed up to take to the build site. I decided I'd bring my framing nailer with air compressor, hammer, tape measure, square, things like that. I also had some leftover tar paper that I thought they could use, and a couple buckets of nails to get them started. Once I had all the tools packed up, it was time to pack up my building apprentice, Mr. Norman.
Good boy. Load up.
Sometimes getting him in the truck can take a little persuasion.
Load up, Norm. You want this? Oh, yeah. Load up.
It's only about a half an hour drive from my cabin to the trailhead that goes into Steve's, which I gotta say is really convenient, and it's gonna be great to be able to call him my neighbor. Like I said earlier, their property is completely remote, and so you can't drive a truck in there any time of the year, and the winter is actually the best time to haul in supplies because you can use a snow machine with trailers to get big pieces of lumber and building materials in there. Otherwise you'd have to walk them in one at a time and it would be nearly impossible. And a quick reminder that all the music in my videos is totally original, written and recorded by me and my buddy Forrest Wilson. You guys can download it on my website, as well as get some of the merch at alaskacabinadventures.com.
Hey, Norm. Come on, Norm, let's go.
This may look like a well-established trail, but it's only like that because Steve has spent a lot of hours grooming it to make sure he has an easy ride getting in and out of the cabin.
Yeah, look at this. This is pretty proper. But I'm glad you guys picked this spot.
I couldn't believe how much work Steve and Tess had already gotten done. They actually hauled a snowblower out to their property and cleared out an area that they wanted to build a cabin underneath 2 or 3 feet of snow. And then they dug through completely frozen ground to put a foundation in. He already had pier blocks and beams and even the start of a subfloor. I was really impressed with their progress. I don't think anyone has gotten this early of a jump on a cabin build in Alaska. These guys had a great idea by setting up this garage tarp earlier in the fall. That way they have a place to put all their 2x4s and building materials, a place to cook food and get up out of the rain. Really good idea, one that I wish I had thought of when I was building my cabin. Anymore these days, I'm kind of getting tired of the term off-grid. Apparently it means something different to everyone who hears it. Some people think it just means that you live off the utilities grid. Other people think that it means that you live in a cave with nothing but a loincloth somewhere out in the middle of the wilderness. But either way, if this property doesn't qualify as off-grid, I don't know what does. It's miles away from the nearest road, and there's absolutely no running water, electricity, or anything like that. So they use this little portable generator to keep things charged up and run power tools. We wasted no time getting to work and started by buttoning up the subfloor. He had already had all the joists cut, and so all we had to do was screw them in with these deck screws. Steve's using treated 2x6 joists that span over 3 different beams, meaning that the joists span only about 6 feet over each beam, which is going to make for a nice sturdy floor.
I'll try to lift the frame up and have you guys get underneath the edge, I guess. Or?
Okay. Unlike all the cabins that I've built, Steve opted to do a fiberglass insulated subfloor, which means that he needed some kind of plywood on the underside to keep it in there and protected from things like porcupines and squirrels. I don't know how other people do this, but this seemed like the best idea, to just lift it up and slide it underneath and then tack it in. Otherwise you'd have to put it on there and flip it upside down. I don't know, let me know in the comments how you guys might do something like this. We made sure to snap a chalk line right where the studs would fall, so that way it'd be easier to screw it in from up underneath the cabin.
Good enough.
That's got to come towards me just a bit. I'm going to lift this bit.
I kind of flatten it and press it against that board to cut it.
Once we had all the insulation in, we installed a plastic vapor barrier over the top of it. This will keep the moisture from the ground from making its way up into the cabin, and it also stops the moisture that's in the cabin from making its way down into the insulation, which would then cool and condensate, causing the insulation down there to get wet. I will admit that seeing the floor come together like this made me a little jealous that I hadn't done the same thing on my new cabin. It does seem like it's just going to be a really warm, bomb-proof floor, and I kind of think that next time I build a cabin, I'll do it the same way. Next up was the floor decking. Steve decided to use 3/4 inch OSB tongue and groove for this, which is exactly what I use for both of my other cabins. It's a great option. You don't want to go with a flimsy subfloor decking, and the tongue and groove helps it lock together, adding structural strength and better barriers. You always want to make sure and use screws to lock this stuff down. If you use nails, over time it'll start to come loose and your floor will get really squeaky. Screws stop that from happening, but they also really lock the floor together more than nails do. If you can, you want to use glue to glue it to the floor joist as well, but since there's a vapor barrier in between, that wasn't an option here, so the screws will have to do. But remember, when you're screwing into the subfloor, that's pressure treated wood down there, so make sure to use some kind of coated deck screw when you do that. Before we knew it, it was already 5 o'clock in the evening, and everyone was getting pretty hungry. So Steve bucked up this spruce tree, and Tess got a fire going so that we could cook some cheeseburgers in a cast iron skillet right on the open flame.
Or anything else that needs cut.
By the time we were done with dinner, it was getting pretty late in the day, the temperature was dropping, and we still had a long ride to get back to the truck. But first we had to unload all this extra lumber that Steve had hauled out on this last trip. Check out this cool trailer that he built completely from scratch in order to haul this stuff in. I was really impressed. It's kind of an old Eskimo-style trailer, and it worked great for getting big beams, heavy ladders, all sorts of stuff into the property. Nice job, Steve. The work for today was over, but the cabin was far from done, so I put a couple things in my car and headed back to my cabin, but I would be back soon to help them again. Steve and Tess are lucky enough to be renting a small cabin a few miles down the road from here and are able to come and go from their property pretty readily. I wasn't able to make it back out here to help them for a couple more days, and in that short time, they got a ton of work done, including getting their first 3 walls stood up and locked in. But before long, I was back, and I even came with a gift, a 4x10 by 16-foot beam that would serve as their main ridge support for the rafters. I also brought an extra ladder and a couple more tools to help them along their way. This load was a pretty big one. Not only did it have the beam and the ladder, but it had all the sheet metal roofing and a bunch of plywood. I was anxious to see how Steve's trailer would handle such a heavy load, especially with the snow starting to soften. And that was the thing, these guys were on a time crunch. Not only are they heading out to a fishing lodge for the summer, but the snow was starting to get really rotten due to unseasonably warm temperatures. And so you can't get materials out there once this trail is gone, so time was of the essence to get this thing done. Steve wasn't the only one who's benefiting from the trail that he had put in. The local moose like it too.
Go on, Moose. There he goes.
They made a really smart choice and put a tarp down before they left the night before. It had snowed a couple inches and then it melted and refroze, leaving a solid inch of ice all over the floor of their cabin.
Good thing you tarped it.
Yeah.
The first order of business was getting their last wall put up, which would be an easy one because it had no windows, so it'd just be basic framing, standing it up, and then putting all the top plates on to tie them together. These guys did a great job with the first 3 walls, especially considering this is the first cabin that they've ever built. Something I forgot to mention earlier is the basic layout of this cabin. This is a 12 by 12 foot cabin, and I think they're planning on doing a 12-12 pitch for the roof. Nice and steep to make sure the snow would shed off. This was probably going to be the last opportunity I had to come out and help these guys build. See, I've got a couple of big life events, you might say, coming up, so I wanted to help Steve get that really heavy ridge beam lifted up before I wasn't able to come back. But before we could do that, we had to finish all the walls, tie them together with the top plate, sheathe it, Tyvek, and get the loft built so we had something to stand on. It was going to be a long day.
164 and a half. Water. good enough, we can pull it and shoot it.
So far, so good. We were making good progress. All the walls were up, the top plates were on, and everything was plumb. But the funny thing about building is that sometimes what can eat up the most time is stupid little things, like looking for your pencil or having to cut the same board 3 times.
1/8 of an inch too long, or 1/4 inch. Gonna have to trim it a little bit.
All right. And today was no exception.
Crown is up. Oh, it's so close. Oh yeah, like a glove.
By the time we got the walls and top plate all finished, we were starting to get hungry again. So Steve split up some kindling and Tess and I got a fire started. Tonight's dinner was going to be a good one. T-bone steaks and baked potatoes cooked right on the fire. But the best thing to do is get that fire started and let it die down to a nice hot bed of coals. So we decided the best move would be to build up the fire really good and let it die down while we finished up the next couple steps of the building project. We still had so much work to do, but I was pretty optimistic because of how much we were getting done already. It's really amazing what 3 people can get done when you're all working towards a common goal. Typically you'd want to put some kind of wall sheeting on, like OSB or plywood, and then put your Tyvek on, and then put whatever siding you want for the cabin on top of that. But these guys decided to skip that step and do Tyvek directly to the studs, and then put T111 over top of that, which would act not only as the wall sheeting, but also their siding.
Oh! You want to think all you gotta do is fix one for me.
I got it, but... Got it. I am pretty jealous of how fast this cabin was getting done. It took me nearly all summer to get my cabin built. Granted, most of it I was doing by myself, and a second set of hands, or 3 sets of hands, can just make these projects go so much quicker. However, if you are by yourself, this is a great trick for getting your siding put up. You can just put a level 2x4 at the bottom exactly to the height that you want your plywood to sit and rest it on that while you nail it in. This makes it so you're not holding things and everything comes out nice and square and level.
Sweet.
With pretty much all the sheeting done, it was time to get this loft built. We were running out of daylight, and we needed to get that ridge beam up before I had to go. Steve decided to do a couple of ledger boards that would run the span of the loft, and then hang the floorboards for the loft off of that. That's a pretty big difference though, huh? 3/4 of an inch?
Yeah, how is that? Well, closer to half. It's about ½ inch.
It's important to remember that nothing is perfect when it comes to framing. A little bit of play here and there in the cabin's no big deal, and in this case the walls were bowing out just a little bit more in the center than they were at the ends, so we decided to measure each board and have them taper out as it got closer to the center of the cabin.
Get in your home. We short on that one?
That's my...
It's alright.
This loft was only going to come out about 6.5 feet from the back wall, and I think their plan is to turn the bed horizontal rather than have it vertical with the cabin. That way you have more overhead space in the main cabin that feels open and bright. Otherwise you kind of feel like you're boxed in a little bit. They recessed the ceiling down about, I don't know, 6.5, 7 feet, so that way if someone really tall came in there they might have to duck, but a normal person should have no problem.
What was that, Matt? I got one in my...
With the loft just about finished, I took a moment to step back and see our progress. There's few better feelings in the world than to sit back and look at something that you've built with your own 2 hands. Granted, this is Steve and Tess's cabin, but I sure am proud and honored to be a part of its construction. Springtime in Alaska can be a deceptive thing. There's still snow on the ground, and yet the days are really long and bright. By now it's actually 8 o'clock at night, and we had one more step to go. It was time to get this huge 16-foot 4x10 beam up in its place. Easy peasy.
Oh, I'm so glad you did that.
Having the beam set up in the middle of the roof would make it so that the tarp would actually drain water and snow off the edges instead of just pooling up in the center. And it wasn't a second too soon. As soon as we had it on there, a nice snowstorm came in that delivered a couple of inches of snow followed by some rain. So it was a good thing we had that tarp up when we did.
Lay it across and brace them.
So I know I said that this was a start to finish video, and I might have fibbed just a little bit, because in order to see this cabin finished, you guys are going to have to head over to Steve and Tess's YouTube channel called Home Sweet Home Alaska. I really can't say enough good things about these two. They're such a sweet couple and work so well together. Tess moved up from California just a couple of years ago, and her and Steve met at a remote fishing lodge. Since then, she's totally embraced the Alaska life, and I am so impressed by her adventurous spirit, and she's not too bad when it comes to making YouTube videos either. So again, if you guys want to see this cabin completed, head on over to the Home Sweet Home Alaska YouTube channel and check it out. I think you'll really enjoy what you see. And don't forget to check out my website at alaskacabinadventures.com. You guys can download the music, get your hands on some merchandise, or check out photos and learn more about the cabin. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.